Good morning, and I hope you had a happy 4th of July holiday. Today on Spotlight, we'll ask our experts what impact COVID-19 has had on our Asian American community and the status of U.S.-China relations. My guest, Tom Watkins, advisor to the Michigan-China Innovation Center, and Professor Roland Wang of the University of Michigan, and a board member of the Association of Chinese Americans Incorporated. And later on our Sunday morning program, we continue our interviews with the candidates for Oakland County Executive. Today, the man who wants to keep his current job, Democrat Dave Coulter. It's Sunday, July the 5th. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. Let's just jump right in. The president and others have said China is to blame for the coronavirus, pointed fingers at them, and we can see from a USA Today recent report that discrimination is up in America over Asian Americans and African Americans. Both true from your perspectives, and is it fair? Tom Watkins, I'll begin with you.
It's really unacceptable what is transpiring in our country today. You know, the old saying, a fish rots from the head down. Our president needs to knock it off. His xenophobic comments calling the virus a global pandemic, the Kung flu, or the China virus, or the Wuhan virus, pointing finger has no place in a pandemic. We all need to be working together to address this global pandemic. Yes, it did begin in China. There's very little doubt about that. But now the focus has to be of coming together, and spreading xenophobia, pointing fingers, creating blame is just unacceptable in the 21st century.
Roland, your take on this, you're involved on the board of an organization where this has to be discussed probably 24/7.
That's correct. We are bearing the brunt of the consternation, the discrimination, and the community is coming together in terms of data gathering, just quantifying the extent of the xenophobia that's affecting the country. About 2,000 incidents have been reported coast to coast since March, and we're busy with responses to those incidents, and also working proactively in terms of fundraising and donating PPEs, personal protection equipment, to local law enforcement, that sort of thing.
That here in the metropolitan Detroit community, the Chinese American community have raised funds, nearly $1 million, to provide that personal protection equipment to hospitals and first responders and others. So while they're being bashed, they're reaching out and doing what all good Americans do in a time of need. They're giving back to their community. And I'm just so, that the contrast between those two are just extremely, extremely powerful.
How much is China to blame for some of these attitudes that we see manifested in the various opinion polls? Certainly it started there from all the information that we have, but they also tried to cover it up.
As countries with large scientific bases, there was a level of cooperation in scientific research, that sort of thing, and that is sort of now in tatters, and that's not going to help in terms of the finding a cure or resolution to the pandemic. And so that's one of the spillover effects of what's going on, in the U.S.-China geopolitics.
Mm-hmm.
As I pointed out, Chuck, that clearly China could have, should have, perhaps done things earlier. The local official in Wuhan in the wet market could have done something earlier. But we need to pivot really quickly from that. We have a global pandemic that's wreaking havoc across our country. It's unleashed a global economic tsunami. And blame and pointing fingers and tit for tat is not a strategy, and nor is it a plan. The fact is that we slowed things down here. The president had reports for 2 months and did nothing, while a number of countries around the world that are following science, that are washing their hands, that are wearing masks, practicing social distancing, is seeing the number of COVID cases go down. we're seeing the number of COVID cases grow, where we can't travel to Europe because they don't want us. We're viewed as this, the old adage it used to be, in a very xenophobic way, the sick man of Asia. Today, we have the sick man of the United States. The blame game in America it's always been someone, whether it's Mexican people, African American people, Jewish people, Italian people, Japanese, and now it's Chinese. There's a GOP, it's a Washington Post article of a couple of weeks ago, where their strategy from the right is to blame China. Whatever comes up, blame China. The American people should be smarter than that and to ask, what are our politicians doing to invest in the American people? Because when we invest in the American people, good things happen in this country.
All right, I need to sneak a little break in here. When we come right back, let's talk about long-term relations with the U.S. and China and what perhaps we need to be looking at in doing both countries once we get past the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll be right back. Stay with us. And welcome back to Spotlight. Professor Wang, how do we move past COVID-19 once we get out of all of this and get back to building on the cultural and the educational and the economic ties that bind both the U.S. and China together, whether people like it or not? These are two huge world powers, and our economies are just completely intertwined with each other.
We are the two largest economies in the world, and there just needs to be an analysis as to what are the areas that are beneficial to the United States and to China, and is there common ground in terms of those areas where there can be a common good. And it should not be absolutely adversarial. I think that there is a lot of benefit to having a synergistic relationship with two large economies. There's certainly areas for caution in terms of military or defense sensitivities, that sort of thing. But beyond that, there's a lot of common ground.
Tom Watkins, you recently wrote a column and you said, don't blame China for America's problems. It's our fault. What did you mean by that?
Look, Chuck, I'm an old boxer. When you get in the ring with somebody, even if it's your old friend, your sparring partner, you're there to win. So it should come as no surprise to us that China wants to rise to reclaim its wealth and power that it had for many centuries. There are a lot of issues, and I commend the president for some of the things that he's taken up to address the theft of intellectual property, to make sure that we have fair and equal trade between our two countries. There are things we need to address. But having said that, we also need to build bridges and not be digging moats and erecting walls between the two largest economies, 1/5 of all humanity. As Roland has just pointed out, we have to find ways to get along. If we think that having tension with China is the way to go, or to have a Cold War tilt into a hot war, we're sadly mistaken. The only thing that's worse, perhaps, than China's rise would be China's demise. All major world issues are going to intersect at the corner of Washington, D.C. and Beijing. It'll impact the people of China, the people of America, and in fact, all of humanity. So we need leaders that are going to build a positive relationship going forward.
Professor Wang, we have seen protests in both countries. Does that suggest that perhaps both countries have dirty hands in many respects in terms of human relations and how they are treating their citizens, and that both countries could use much improvement on what we are currently doing?
The idea of community policing is, giving rise, given the Black Lives Matter movement, the killing of George Floyd, that sort of thing. But then we can look across the ocean to what's going on abroad and how police community relations are certainly tenuous in places like Hong Kong, and see some of the similarities in terms of over militarization and and overreach. And so it's a civil rights and civil liberties issue, and it's something that can be observed both here and there.
Tom Watkins, I'll give you the final question in the backdrop of a very political year and an important election year. And you can only pick one. Will this next election, on so many levels, not just Washington at the very top, but even the down races, will it be decided on a referendum of COVID-19 leadership, the economy, or race?
Yes. All three of those issues, Chuck, are clearly...
You're only supposed to pick one, Tom.
Yeah, I know, but I think the answer is yes, of all of them. All important issues. We need to get this country back again. And the way that we do that is treating all of our citizens equally and fairly, creating opportunity for hope, for jobs, for solid education. And we have to understand that we're not an island. We have to build solid relationships, not only with China, but our allies around the world.
Professor Roland Wang and Tom Watkins, thank you so much for joining us today on Spotlight. Stay safe. And coming up, we'll talk to one of the two Democratic candidates for Oakland County Executive, Dave Coulter. He'll be with us right after this. And welcome back to Spotlight. Joining me now is Oakland County Executive Dave Coulter. Mr. County Executive, thank you for joining us today on Spotlight.
Chuck, it's always great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. The last time you were here, it was the beginning of the year. It was right after you gave your State of the County address. That was the focus of that interview. I went back and looked at it, and I only asked you one sort of political question. That was the very last question, and I asked you if you were ready for a rough and tumble campaign. You said you were. Fast forward to now, you laid out a whole agenda of things you wanted to accomplish. The world has changed and has been turned upside down since then. Should you be judged on what you said you wanted to get done, or should you be judged on how you have been a leader on COVID-19?
I guess it would be fair to be judged on both of those things. You know, we're still working through some of the programs that I talked about in my State of the County, and I'm still very proud of those, and that's still our future. But our present is a global pandemic that's created both a health and an economic crisis in Oakland County. And you know, I'm focused on keeping the virus at low levels now and managing it, helping our businesses and our residents get through this. So you know, it feels a little like there was a pre-COVID and a post-COVID world, but we can address both of them at the same time.
Let me ask you point blank, because I know you've probably heard it on the campaign trail, and some of your opponents have sort of suggested that you have used the COVID-19 pandemic, a very serious virus here, to a political advantage in your campaign. That it was something that got a lot of attention. You held a lot of press conferences. You used it to the max. Fair criticism or not?
You know what? To me, Chuck, there is nothing political about a pandemic. You know, it's been critical to me from the beginning that we were transparent with our data and that we were communicating good science-based information to the public. And we've done that in a number of ways, not just me at a press conference, but we've had town halls and we've had email blasts and newsletters. And you know, we have leaned in to being transparent, because I believe that that's been a big part of why we've been successful in Oakland County. I think when people have the data, they have the straight facts from the horse's mouth, in this case me, they make better decisions. And we brought our numbers down, I think, in part because of the importance that we've placed on communications at all levels. And so, you know, it's insulting to me to say that I would ever use a health crisis politically. That's just not in my nature.
And let's talk about the primary right now, because that's what you're leading up to. You have an opponent, Andy Meisner, who's been the longtime county treasurer. Why should people vote for you instead of him?
You know, I think I have a record of demonstrated leadership. We have accomplishments that we're talking about. As you referred to earlier, it's not just COVID, although I think that Oakland County, not just me, but I'm talking about our health officials and others, have really leaned into this. We've made health orders even beyond the governors in some cases. We shut down shopping malls before the state required that, for example, because we've taken this very seriously. So I think that people can judge me on my leadership and the other things that we've done. You know, we started out right out of the gate. I hired a chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officer long before the murder of George Floyd, because we knew how important it was to address the racial disparities that happen in the systems in Oakland County. For instance, we were working on our Oakland Health 360 plan to expand healthcare to our residents and access to affordable, quality healthcare for our residents before this even happened. So I think people have a record to judge me on, and that's all I ask them to do.
Do you think people have had a fair amount of time to judge you on your fiscal integrity?
I'm very proud of the budget that we presented last year and passed, and the budget that I just presented the other day here for next year. We took that budget to Wall Street, just like Brooks used to, and we let them tear it apart, and they grilled us for an entire day in Chicago. And they came back right before COVID hit, so I think it got lost in the news a little bit, but they reaffirmed our AAA bond rating based on the budget that we presented and the path forward from a budget perspective that we laid out. So we still have the AAA. We have a 3-year balanced budget that was passed unanimously. And I can tell you that Oakland County is and will remain the economic engine of Michigan.
Politics can be a rough and tumble sport. You took a hit by the Detroit News shortly after you got into office there as the county executive. They criticized you, or at least pointed out the fact, I should say in fairness to them, that you had not paid a water bill for over a year, a $500 some odd water bill. Yeah. You have since paid that, but one raises the question, does that go to your fiscal integrity? If you can't pay your own water bills on time, can you run an entire county?
Chuck, I addressed it at the time. It was a stupid mistake. I have personally a great credit rating. It's the one bill that I still have to pay by check as opposed to online, and I lost track of it. I paid it immediately. It's embarrassing, but I owned up to it, and I'm good on my bills now. Thanks.
All right, we're going to take a little break. We'll come right back. I want to talk to you about diversity and inclusion in a very changing Oakland County. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Mr. County Executive, you cite on your website, and you have mentioned it in numerous speeches, the importance of diversity and inclusion. How should the voters judge you on that particular goal, what you have done thus far, and what else would you like to do in a very changing Oakland County?
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of things that I would want the voters to know is, first, when I got elected, I appointed the most diverse leadership team in Oakland County history, including the first female, who's my chief deputy, and the first African-American, Rudy Hobbs, to serve with me in my senior leadership team. That had never happened before. I walk the walk, I don't just talk the talk. We also passed the county's first non-discrimination policy, so that everybody, both internally and through our contracts and vendors, have to abide by non-discrimination rules in Oakland County. I'm very proud of that. And then, of course, I just recently hired, and she started on July 1st, the county's first ever chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. This is a critical part of my values. I believe that Oakland County will achieve its ultimate success. We've had success. We have a great foundation, but we can be better, and we'll achieve that when we lift up and celebrate everybody in Oakland County, and everybody in Oakland County feels like they have an opportunity to participate in the success and quality of life that we enjoy here.
You were raised and educated over there in Macomb County before you came to Oakland County, and of course you're the former mayor of Ferndale, and you've also been on the Oakland County Commission, so you know something about that county. One of the thorniest issues that have faced this region is transit. You know how Macomb County feels, you know how Oakland County feels, you know how Wayne County feels, and you've interacted with all of the chief executives as well as the City of Detroit mayor. What is it that you want to see done on transit, and what do you think is doable in this region?
So I want to see transit flat out. I believe that this region needs a transit system if we're going to compete with other regions in the country, if we're going to keep our young people here after they graduate, if we're going to get our employees around, we need transit. And I've been a proponent of that for a very long time. What it takes to get it done, it takes willing partners. So where we were moving earlier this year is, Macomb County said, Mr. Hackle and the board there, we're not in favor at this point in time of going down that road or going down that track, you might say. So we said, that's okay. Then we'll do a coalition of the willing. Mayor Duggan, Warren Evans, Jason Morgan from Washington, they're still very eager to get a transit system off the ground in Oakland County, in Southeast Michigan. And so I, as the executive, am happy to collaborate and partner with them and figure out how we can do this in a three county footprint for now. But certainly when Macomb feels like it's right for them, be happy to include them as well.
Quick final question. You have never been elected county-wide by the people of Oakland County.
Right.
If you get past the primary in November, would you be good for the down ballot races in what is a very partisan, very tough political year, very important political year? Or would it just be you may be good for your office, but not be able to help a lot of the other candidates?
Oh, I'm gonna work for all of our candidates. And I'm gonna work, quite frankly, to try to make Joe Biden the next president of the United States. So I'll be doing everything I can on top of my own race to do that. I think that the leadership in Washington has been missing, especially in this COVID situation. And I think our country and our county need to continue. Our country needs to go in a different direction, and Oakland County needs to continue in the direction that we've now begun to move in the past year. And I think it's a positive direction. I think the voters of Oakland County believe that it's a positive direction. Oakland's going to be a very critical county in this election. There's a lot of voters here, and they've been voting blue for the last few elections. And so this is going to be a spirited election, but I will be a champion and cheerleader at the top of the Oakland County ticket for all of our candidates.
Mr. County Executive, thank you so much for joining us today on Spotlight. Good luck on the campaign trail, and we'll see what happens on primary election day in August.
Great to talk to you.
Good talking to you. Stay safe. And I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the Spotlight. We hope you have a great week.